What if I told you that 90% of the time you throw a spinnerbait for pre-spawn walleye, you're actually scaring them away? It sounds crazy, I know. Today, we're talking about the single biggest mistake anglers make with one of the best walleye lures out there, retrieving it way, way too fast. By the end of this video, you'll understand why slowing down is the secret to getting more bites, and I'll show you exactly how painfully slow you need to go to trigger these fish. It's a simple change that the pros know, but most weekend anglers completely overlook, and it could be the difference between a full live well and going home empty-handed. So let me know in the comments right now. Do you believe a faster retrieve is always better for reaction strikes? Let's see who's on which side of this debate before we dive in. For decades, the gospel of spinnerbait fishing has been speed. We've been told to burn it, to cover water, to make those blades flash and thump to trigger that aggressive predatory instinct. It's the classic advice you hear at every boat ramp and read in every old fishing magazine. And let's be fair, in the heat of summer, when the water is warm and the fish are active and chasing bait all over the place, sure, it can absolutely work. But we're not talking about summer. We're talking about that critical early season pre-spawn window, a time when the water is ice cold and the fish are playing by a completely different set of rules. This is where that old wisdom completely falls apart, and following it blindly is what costs you a ton of fish. It's time to unlearn what you've been taught and start thinking like a cold water predator. Let's begin by shattering the biggest myth, the reaction strike. We've all been programmed to believe in it. The idea is that if you rip a lure past a fish's face, its primal instinct will just take over, and it'll bite without even thinking. Imagine this scenario, which you've probably lived a dozen times. It's early spring, the water is a chilly 39 degrees, and you're methodically casting along a promising rocky point. You launch your favorite chartreuse spinnerbait, and immediately start cranking it back to the boat at a good steady clip. You feel the blades churning, you see the skirt pulsing. It looks perfectly alive. It looks exactly like something that should get eaten. But the big pre-spawn walleye that's sitting motionless near the bottom isn't thinking about an aggressive chase. Her metabolism is in the tank. She is conserving every ounce of energy for the grueling spawn ahead. To her, that fast-moving bait isn't a meal opportunity. It's just an annoying blur of noise and color that's moving far too quickly to be worth the effort. It's an equation that doesn't add up for her. The fish sees it, registers it, and then completely dismisses it, because the energy required to hunt it down is far more than the potential caloric reward. This is the fatal flaw in applying summer's fast retrieve logic to the pre-spawn period. Now, let's talk about the walleye's point of view. A fish is a cold-blooded creature. Its body temperature, and therefore its metabolism and activity level, are directly dictated by the temperature of the water it's swimming in. When the water is in the 35 to 45 degree range, a walleye's metabolism is crawling at a snail's pace. It's not actively hunting and chasing down schools of bait fish like it will in July. Instead, it's opportunistic and lethargic. It's looking for the easiest possible meal it can find. Think of it like a person on a cold winter day. You're less likely to want to go out and run a marathon. You're more likely to want to sit by the fire and have a hot meal brought to you. That walleye is in the same state of mind. It wants maximum calories for minimum energy expenditure. A bait fish that is darting around quickly represents a huge energy investment. A chase might fail, wasting precious energy. A slow, struggling, or dying bait fish, on the other hand, looks like a sure thing. It's a guaranteed meal that won't put up a fight. By retrieving your spinnerbait too fast, you are presenting it as a healthy, energetic bait fish that is simply not worth the gamble for a cold, calculating predator. So, what's the direct consequence of this speed mismatch? You're essentially invisible to the fish that matter. You might be fishing over dozens, even hundreds of walleyes on a prime piece of pre-spawn structure. Your fish finder might be lighting up, but your lure is moving in a different dimension than they are. Think about standing on a street corner. A car that drives by at 60 miles per hour is just a blur. You can't make out the driver, the color, or the model. But a car that rolls by at 5 miles per hour, you can see every detail. It's the same thing under the water. Your spinnerbait, when burned through that cold water, is that 60-mile-per-hour car. The walleye might detect a flash of movement or a brief pulse of vibration, but it's gone before the fish can even process what it was, lock onto it, and decide to commit. It doesn't have time to see the profile, the color, or the subtle action of the skirt. You are failing to give the fish the one thing it needs most in cold water: time. Time to see the bait, time to approach the bait, and time to decide to eat the bait. It's a simple concept, but it's the one that most anglers ignore in their rush to cover water. Let's introduce the antidote to this problem. It's a technique called slow rolling, and when I say slow, I mean painfully, almost uncomfortably slow. The goal of slow rolling a spinnerbait is not to make it look like a fleeing bait fish, but to make it look like a large, struggling, or disoriented one. You want to retrieve it just fast enough to make the blades turn over and thump. That's the absolute bare minimum speed required. If your blades are spinning, you're doing it right. Anything faster is probably too fast for these conditions. Imagine you're on the boat, you make a long cast towards a shallow gravel flat. The lure hits the water, you let it sink to the bottom. Then, you begin the slowest retrieve you can possibly manage. You should be able to feel every single rotation of that big Colorado blade through your rod tip. Thump, thump, thump. It's a deliberate, methodical pulse. This presentation screams easy meal to any nearby walleye. It's a large profile moving slowly, suggesting it's weak or injured, and it's staying in the strike zone for an incredibly long time, giving every fish in the area a chance to find it and eat it. This isn't just fishing, it's a game of patience. How do you know if you're doing it right? It's all about feel. Slow rolling is a tactile technique. You need to be in constant communication with your lure. The benchmark is simple. Can you feel the blade? As you start your retrieve, you should feel a dead weight until the blade catches the water and begins to spin. That's when you feel the first thump telegraph up your line and into your rod. Your job is to maintain that thump with the slowest possible reel speed. If you lose the feel of the blade, it means you've slowed down too much and the blade has stopped spinning. You need to slightly increase your speed until you feel it start thumping again. It's a constant micro adjustment. It helps to use a lure with a single large Colorado blade, as they provide the most distinct thump and can be worked at the slowest speeds. A willow leaf blade, by contrast, needs more speed to spin and provides more of a high-frequency vibration than a low-frequency thump. For cold water, that deep rhythmic thump is what calls them in. It mimics the tail kick of a large bait fish and is easier for a lethargic walleye to track. Let's visualize the path of the lure during a proper slow roll. You cast out and let the spinnerbait fall all the way to the bottom on a semi-slack line. Once it hits bottom, you point your rod tip down towards the water and begin that super slow retrieve. Because you're moving so slowly, the lure will stay very close to the bottom for the majority of the retrieve. It will tick off rocks, dredge through sand, and occasionally bump into wood. This is exactly what you want. This bottom contact does two critical things. First, it creates puffs of silt and makes noise, which helps attract fish from a distance. It mimics something rooting around on the bottom, like a crayfish or a struggling bait fish. Second, it ensures your lure is in the prime strike zone. Pre-spawn walleyes are almost always relating to the bottom. They are not suspended in the middle of the water column chasing bait. By keeping your spinnerbait in that bottom 1 to 2 foot zone, you are essentially dragging it right through their living room. A fast retrieve would have your lure halfway up the water column after just a few cranks of the reel handle, placing it far above the fish you're trying to catch. It's a game of inches. The gear you use plays a massive role in your ability to slow roll effectively. Using the wrong setup can make it nearly impossible to maintain the right speed and feel the bite. First, let's talk about the reel. A reel with a low gear ratio is your best friend here. Something in the 5.3 to 1 or even a 5.0 to 1 range is ideal. A high-speed reel, like a 7.1 to 1, is designed for picking up line quickly. Even when you're turning the handle slowly on a high-speed reel, the spool is still taking in a lot of line, making it incredibly difficult to achieve that crawling pace. A lower gear ratio reel forces you to slow down. It makes that super slow retrieve feel much more natural and easier to maintain for long periods. It might feel like you're not getting anywhere, but that's the point. You are translating the slow turn of your hand into an equally slow movement of the lure, which is precisely what the technique demands. Trying to slow roll with a fast reel is like trying to drive 5 miles per hour in a race car stuck in 5th gear. It's jerky, inefficient, and ultimately ineffective. Your rod is your antenna. It's the critical link that tells you what your lure is doing. For slow rolling, a more moderate action rod is often better than an extra fast one. A 7 foot to 7 foot 6 inch medium heavy power rod with a moderate fast action is a great choice. Why? The slightly softer tip does a couple of things. First, it helps you lob the heavy spinnerbait out there instead of snapping it, which can prevent line tangles. More importantly, it allows the fish to inhale the bait more easily. When a walleye eats a slow-moving spinnerbait, it's often not a violent, bone-jarring strike. It can feel like a subtle tick, a spongy weight, or like you just snagged a wet leaf. The slightly more forgiving tip of a moderate action rod will bend a little as the fish takes the bait, giving it an extra split second to get the lure fully in its mouth before you feel the bite and set the hook. With a super stiff, extra fast rod, you might feel the bite and react too quickly, pulling the lure away from the fish before it's fully committed. It's a small detail that leads to a much higher hookup ratio. Let's not forget the line. The type of line you use can drastically change how you feel the lure and the bites. Many anglers love braided line for its sensitivity, but for this specific technique, it might not be the best choice. Braid has zero stretch, which means that while you feel everything, the fish also feels you instantly. This can cause them to drop the bait if they sense resistance. A much better option for slow rolling is a good quality fluorocarbon line in the 12 to 17 pound test range. Fluorocarbon offers the best of both worlds. It's nearly invisible underwater, which is a bonus in the clear water of early spring. It is also much more abrasion resistant than braid, which is crucial when you're constantly grinding your lure along rocky bottoms. Most importantly, it has a small amount of stretch. This slight give acts as a shock absorber, helping to prevent you from pulling the hook on a surging fish, and just like the moderate action rod, gives the walleye that microsecond longer to engulf the bait before feeling the full resistance of your setup. This is a finesse presentation, even though you are using a power fishing lure. Spinnerbait selection itself is critical for this technique. Not all spinnerbaits are created equal for slow rolling. As mentioned earlier, you want a bait with a large single Colorado blade. A 3/4 ounce or even a 1 ounce model is perfect. The extra weight helps you maintain bottom contact, especially on windy days or in current. It also allows you to make longer casts. The big Colorado blade is key because it displaces a lot of water and creates a deep, low-frequency thump that cold water walleyes can track easily with their lateral line. It also provides a lot of lift, which is what allows you to retrieve it so slowly without it getting snagged. The blade acts almost like a helicopter rotor, keeping the bait slightly up and off the bottom while still allowing the head to tick the rocks. Tandem willow leaf spinnerbaits, the kind you might use for bass in the summer, simply require too much speed to get their blades spinning correctly and don't provide that same slow thumping vibration that triggers pre-spawn walleye. Color choice can also play a role, although it's often secondary to speed and vibration. In the often stained or murky water of early spring, you want colors that provide a strong silhouette and high visibility. Think bold and bright. Chartreuse, fire tiger, and bright orange are classic pre-spawn walleye colors for a reason. They show up well. A combination like a chartreuse and white skirt with a gold Colorado blade is a standard for a reason. It works almost everywhere. In clearer water conditions, you might want to switch to more natural patterns that mimic the local forage. Colors like perch, shiner, or Cisco patterns can be deadly. Don't be afraid to add a trailer hook. Because the bites can be subtle and the fish can be lethargic, they often just nip at the back of the lure. A stinger hook pinned to the back of the main hook will dramatically increase your hookup ratio on those tentative, short-striking fish. It turns those frustrating bumps into landed fish. Let's talk about where to apply this technique. The slow roll isn't something you do out in the middle of a deep basin. It's a structure-oriented technique. You're looking for the specific places where pre-spawn walleyes congregate. These are almost always hard-bottom areas adjacent to their spawning grounds. Think of primary and secondary points leading into spawning bays. Look for gravel flats, rock-strewn shorelines, and riprap along causeways or dams. These areas warm up faster in the spring sun and provide the hard bottom that walleyes need for spawning. The key is to find travel corridors and staging areas. A good lake map is your best tool. Identify a known spawning area, like a shallow gravel-bottomed creek arm, and then work your way out from there, methodically fishing every piece of hard structure you find. You want to position your boat so you can make long casts that allow you to retrieve the lure up and over the structure, keeping it in that prime bottom zone for as long as possible on every single cast. The cast itself is more important than you might think. With this technique, precision and angle matter. You don't want to just randomly bomb casts out into the void. You need to be deliberate. A perfect cast for slow rolling is one that lands your lure past your target and allows you to retrieve it through the key strike zone. For example, if you're fishing a long tapering point, position your boat out deep and cast up onto the shallowest part of the point. This allows you to let the lure sink and then slowly crawl it down the drop-off, keeping it on the bottom the entire time. This presents the lure in the most natural way possible, as if it were a bait fish working its way from shallow to deep. It also keeps your line angle in a way that maximizes your ability to feel the bottom and detect subtle bites. Casting parallel to a rocky bank or a riprap wall is another highly effective approach, as it keeps your lure in that high percentage zone for the entire duration of the retrieve, instead of just a few feet. Now, let's add a subtle but deadly variation, the pause. Just because you're retrieving slowly doesn't mean you have to maintain the exact same cadence on every cast. Sometimes, breaking up that rhythm is what it takes to trigger a following fish. As you're slow rolling the spinnerbait along the bottom, occasionally just stop reeling for a second or two. This pause does something magical. The forward momentum stops, the blade flutters, and the skirt flares out as the lure helicopters down towards the bottom. This sudden change in speed and action can be absolutely irresistible to a walleye that has been trailing your bait, trying to decide whether or not to commit. It looks exactly like a bait fish giving up or suddenly dying. Very often the strike will come the exact moment you re-engage the reel and the blade starts to turn again. It's that change of pace, from moving to stopped and back to moving, that finally forces their hand. Don't just be a robot. Mix in these pauses, especially when your lure comes over a rock or a piece of wood. Let's address a common question. What about wind? Windy days can be your best friend for pre-spawn walleye fishing, but they make slow rolling more challenging. The wind puts a bow in your line, which can kill your sensitivity and make it hard to maintain bottom contact. This is where that heavier spinnerbait, like a 1-ounce model, really shines. The extra weight helps to keep your line tighter and your lure down. You'll also want to position your boat for maximum control. Often, casting with the wind allows you to make incredibly long casts, but it also creates a massive bow in your line. It can sometimes be better to cast into the wind or quartering into it. The casts will be shorter, but you'll have a much more direct connection to your lure and a better feel for what's happening. You have to be a student of the conditions. On calm, sunny days, you may need to make super long casts with lighter line. On windy, overcast days, you can get away with being closer to your targets and using heavier gear. The core principle of slow remains the same. You just have to adjust your tools to achieve it. We need to talk about the hook set. Because the bites are often not aggressive, your hook set needs to be deliberate and powerful, but not instantaneous. Remember that moderate rod and fluorocarbon line? They are designed to help you here. When you feel that spongy weight or that little tick on the line, resist the urge to immediately jerk. Instead, just keep reeling steadily while you drop your rod tip and sweep the rod back firmly to the side. This is called a sweep set. It allows the rod to load up and drives that big single hook home without ripping it out of the fish's mouth. A violent upward snap set, like you might use for a jig bite, can often pull the lure away from the fish. The sweep set keeps pressure on the fish and ensures a solid connection. It feels different, and it takes some getting used to, but it will dramatically improve your landing percentage with this technique. You are not trying to cross their eyes. You are simply driving a single large hook into their jaw and keeping it there. Let's consider the mental side of this technique. Slow rolling is a grind. It requires immense focus and patience. It's the complete opposite of the fast-paced run-and-gun style of fishing. You are going to be making fewer casts per hour. You are going to be retrieving each cast for what feels like an eternity. It's easy to get bored or distracted and unconsciously start speeding up your retrieve. This is the biggest challenge. You have to trust the process. You have to have confidence that even though you are moving slowly, you are fishing more effectively. Imagine a conversation with an old fishing guide on a quiet morning. He'd tell you that fishing isn't about how many casts you make, but about how good each cast is. Every single retrieve needs to be a focused effort to feel the bottom, maintain that blade rotation, and detect the slightest change in pressure. If your mind starts to wander, you will miss bites. It's a meditative form of fishing, and the anglers who can lock in and maintain that discipline are the ones who will be rewarded with the biggest fish. How do you know when this technique is the right choice? The water temperature is your primary guide. Generally, anytime the water is below 50 degrees, slow rolling a spinnerbait should be one of your primary presentations for walleye. As the water warms up into the 50s and 60s, the fish will become more active, and a faster retrieve can start to become more effective. But in that true pre-spawn, cold water period, slow is the way to go. Another clue is the mood of the fish. If you are marking fish on your electronics but you can't get them to bite on jigs, live bait, or faster moving crankbaits, that is a perfect signal that they are in a negative or neutral mood. They aren't willing to chase. This is the exact scenario where the slow-rolled spinnerbait shines. It's a large profile bait that you can present with the subtlety and slowness of a finesse technique, giving those stubborn, non-committal fish an offer that is simply too good to refuse. It's the ultimate tool for cracking the code on tough bite days. Let's think about the competition on the water. On any given spring day, most of the boats you see will be doing one of two things, either vertically jigging or casting and retrieving lures at a medium to fast pace. They are covering water, trying to find active fish. By committing to the slow roll, you are presenting something completely different. You are targeting the fish that everyone else is passing over. These are often the largest fish in the system, the big mature females that are more cautious and less willing to expend energy on a chase. While other anglers are looking for the easy active biters, you are patiently working over key structure, targeting the lazy giants. It's a different mindset. You might not get as many bites as someone dragging a live bait rig, but the quality of the bites you do get will often be much, much higher. You are specifically hunting for a kicker fish, and this technique allows you to do it with a power fishing lure in a way that very few other anglers on the lake are doing. It's your secret weapon. To truly master this, you need to put in the time. It's not a magic bullet you can try for 15 minutes and then give up on. You need to build confidence in it. Go to a spot where you know there are walleyes, tie on a 1-ounce spinnerbait, and force yourself to fish with nothing else for 2 hours. Dedicate yourself to feeling that blade, to maintaining bottom contact, and to retrieving as slowly as humanly possible. When you get that first bite, that subtle thump that turns into a heavy bulldogging head shake, it will all click into place. You will feel the difference, and you'll understand why it works. It's an on-the-water lesson that no video can fully teach. It's the moment where theory becomes reality. From that point on, you will have a powerful tool in your arsenal that you can deploy anytime you're faced with cold water and lethargic walleyes. It will fundamentally change the way you approach the entire spring season, turning a potentially frustrating time of year into one of the most productive. The only way to prove it is to try it. So, let's bring it all together. We've completely thrown out that old, outdated rulebook that says you have to burn a spinnerbait to get bites. We've learned that in the cold water of the pre-spawn period, a walleye's metabolism is in low gear. They are not looking for a high-speed chase. They are looking for an easy, substantial meal that requires the absolute minimum amount of effort. The real turning point, the aha moment in all of this, is realizing that your retrieve speed isn't about triggering an involuntary reaction. It's about perfectly matching the mood of the fish you're targeting. You're not trying to force a bite. You're trying to present an offering so slow, so deliberate, and so tantalizing that a lethargic walleye simply can't refuse it. This isn't just a small tweak to your fishing. This is a fundamental shift in mindset that will make you a much more dangerous and effective cold water angler. It forces you to be more in tune with your lure and what the fish are actually doing. Thank you so much for watching. If this video gave you a new perspective on spinnerbait fishing, do me a solid and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next tip. And now, I want to hear from you. What is the coldest water temperature you've ever caught a walleye on a spinnerbait in? Drop your answer and the story behind it in the comments below. Let's see who holds the cold water record.